Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny, and I'm the Transfer and Community College Coordinator at Immaculata University. I'll be representing TAAC for today, but I would like to introduce to you Deb Bergen. She is currently the Director of Advising and Transfer Services at Bucks County Community College. She has worked at Temple University and Rider University in various grant-funded programs as a counselor where she gained advising experience. She has her master's degree in mental health with a concentration in higher education from Rider University. She will be presenting on her presentation on transferring credits and accommodation. She would like to give the credit to Jennifer Oskinski, the Director of Accessibility at Bucks County Community College. I would like to go over a few housekeeping as well. Please make sure that you keep your questions to the end of the presentation. And if you are entering, please make sure that your microphone is muted towards the end, and then you can be able to ask your question. And this session will be recorded and posted on our YouTube. If you do have any question, you can feel free to reach out to us. So I'll hand it over to Deb to speak about her presentation.
All right, hi everybody. I'm Debora Bergen, as Danny said, from Bucks County Community College. I'm director of the center, and me and Jen created this presentation for the National Institute on the Study of Transfer Students. So I'm dusting off my hat for it because it is a good topic. Jen couldn't be with us today, so I'd just like to give her some props because we worked on this together. So could we go around and introduce yourselves? That way I get an idea of who the audience is. I guess let's go with Sandra.
Hello, everyone. This is Sandra Gonzalez Torres from Community College of Philadelphia.
And
hi, I'm Ann Parazelli, School of Continuing and Professional Studies at Thomas Jefferson University.
Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Rieger Murphy, also at Thomas Jefferson University. Hi, Ann.
Who is P006 if they want to? Okay. How about Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Clark. I'm with the English department as a student success coordinator at Westchester University.
Great. And Bree.
Hi, I'm Brianna Seitz from Millersville University. I'm one of the transfer admissions counselors there.
Okay. Chang.
So sorry. I have to use different things. So my name is Chang, and I'm from Temple.
Okay.
Internet.
Yeah.
International missions. So
yes. How about Cassandra?
Hi, I'm Cassandra. I'm an admissions advisor for the School of Adult and Graduate Education at Cedar Crest College.
How about Olivia? Would you like to introduce yourself? Okay. How about a couple of our TAAC members who didn't introduce themselves? We met Danny. Does Karina want to introduce herself?
Hi, everyone. Hi, thank you, Deb. My name is Karina Dreher, and I represent Widener University.
And Kim.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Kim Brickley. I am from Moore College of Art and Design.
Great. Did I miss anybody?
P00649, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Is Laura Mangano, who is
oh, hi, Laura.
And she's not at a computer, so she. Okay. And then Olivia also mentioned in the chat, she's from University of Northern Iowa.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. All right. So honestly, feel free to ask any questions as we go through, and there will be time afterwards for questions as well. So thank you for coming. So basically, What we're going to talk about is general accommodation process, general transfer process. Some of you might be more familiar with either one. The collaboration between our two offices, special support that might be needed, collaboration maybe between four-year institutions in the community college, and then also supporting the student and self-determination and self-advocacy, because a lot of students need that help. So we kind of work with all of it as well. So with accommodations, some of this would not be, some of it's standard, some of it might be slightly different at each school. So basically at any institution, students have to self-identify, and that's by regulations of ADA. They have to show certain documentation, which would explain maybe what's going on, what the needs are, diagnoses, things like that. And more students are coming onto college campuses with physical disability, mental health needs, autism, basically the whole spectrum of accessibility needs. So most schools will have an intake interview. Whoever they meet with usually will review documentation, and that would help determine reasonable accommodations. And reasonable accommodations is what's required by ADA. And then this might be different at each school, but the student should work with their instructor. And then if accommodations aren't granted, I guess I'll use that word, there is an appeals process. With some schools, the student would bring the accommodation letter, and other schools, it's the accommodation office or disability office that would actually take care of everything. And the student is also encouraged to approach that professor and things like that. You might know more of this, but the transfer process, basically it's choose a major. So we can't match up classes and things like that until there's a major. With that, we have to know what school colleges want to go to. Then anywhere for the community colleges, it's basically seeing if there's a actual agreement. We would work through the agreement with the student. And for that planning, usually our students would meet with a professional advisor, because some of our faculty advisors aren't as versed in the transfer. We help them make a plan, and we use their actual advising and registration system for their plan, because there's notes. We can build out a student semester by semester plan and note whether a certain course would be for a certain school. So that's kind of good. We encourage them to apply to the schools or work with them through the application process, from sending the transcript and things like that. And then if they do tell us about any needs, we help them self-disclose and how to identify at that school. Are there any questions so far? So one of the collaborations we did, and I don't know how well you can see it, is there's a website that we have. So it's basically taking a student that has needs through the process. So what they need to do for accommodations, what they need to do for transfer. Our accessibility office has a lot of connections at various schools in the area, so they know who the student should talk to. So a lot of times, transfer-wise, we give a transfer checklist. We also encourage the student, if they come to us first, to go to accessibility and help them work out transferring the disability documentation or diagnosis documentation. We also help them send the transcript. We, in transfer, help them with the new institution, so who to contact if there's questions. Then accessibility will actually help them, guide them to what they need to do at the transfer school. So who they should talk to, maybe what's available, because each school is a little bit different in not necessarily caters, but there's different ways or specializations for different needs. So they have a contact. we work with them. And the other things we can do are encourage a campus visit. Sometimes that's important because if there's somebody with the physical need, they might want to know how many hills or steps and things like that, and how easy it is to get around campus and to buildings outside, for example. And this isn't a criticism of this particular campus, but sometimes Penn State Abington isn't necessarily a good campus for somebody with a physical need, because they're kind of a hill down, if you've ever been there. Regardless of a need, credits will go the same way. So my office would help them match up the credits and use the agreements. With agreements, does anybody have a question about any transfer agreements or what transfer agreements are? So basically we work through the accessibility services at the school and getting them to the other school. So if the student goes to accessibility and says, well, I'm going to such a school, what documentation I need, they can make any reservations with that person, or let them know, oh, by the way, your accommodation is a certain amount old, so you might need to get reassessed or reevaluated. Is it proper documentation? Again, we send transcripts, and then, as I mentioned, the documentation. So actually, this went really fast. So are there questions? And then some recommendations is maybe for the four-year schools, maybe bring some of that information to a transfer fair. It could be just a flyer or handout. And then maybe on the website, make some of that information more visible. Because I've been getting questions about, well, this is what my need is, how do they support me? And a few schools I can say, but each school has their different niche, I think, or different way they work things. And then even at Bucks, that's why we're collaborating, is bringing down that silos. As I said, more and more students are coming to our campuses with certain needs, and they can go to a four-year school. We show them they can go to a four-year school, encourage them to, and try to get them where they need to go. It's, you know, pretty similar. And then there is, the reason why we kind of don't have a lot is it's a pretty new topic. So there is a little bit of research that's done, a lot of needs for somebody with accessibility might be more mental health or connecting on campus versus the academics, though that's an important part too. So some students need to know or be encouraged for the self-advocacy. I always hear students say they don't want to use accommodations, and I always encourage them to use it because I don't know if you guys have heard, they kind of feel they want to try it on their own. So we try to encourage them not to. So, because I've seen students get themselves in a pickle if they don't use it. It's also frustrating too when a student tries to do it on their own and then just halfway through the semester, they try for accommodations, and honestly, they may not be able to receive them depending on what they need. So, but this is kind of a little references that we've been working with. We're hoping to do more data-driven research or start some research just to see maybe about who our students are, what the needs are, more information about what the colleges, four-year schools are requiring and what they need. Is there anything standard? Because a lot of accessibility accommodations may not necessarily be standard. It's not a one-stop shop. depending on what the diagnosis may be or what the need is. So, but I'd like to open it up to questions. I know this was pretty quick.
Deb, I believe Sandra has a question. She asked, could you please go to the webpage you showed earlier so that we can see it more clearly? And if you can walk us through the developments of this page.
Okay. See if I can. So the development wasn't too difficult. It basically was taking some transfer information and then some accessibility information and kind of merging it. So we basically spoke about what the needs are and what the basic information was. And actually accessibility actually wrote it, and we have access actually to updating our web page, but our IT people actually needed to help us build a new page. And I'm almost there.
Deb, while you're looking for that, this is Sandra. I'm just curious because it sounds like a great idea, like maybe something that CCP should develop for our students to consider for that particular population, students with or who are served by the Center on Disability, who might need additional information in terms of transfer. How did you guys develop that? Was that a need? Did you have someone from the Center on Disability say something, or?
Well, the odd thing was, and I probably should have introduced this part a little bit, is somehow I got an invitation to the conference for transfer, NISTS. And with the topic that year was about collaboration and working together, and I'm pretty close with the director, and something with what they were saying, inviting me to the conference to present and all that stuff, clicked. And so it just kind of morphed into what you just saw. We're hoping to do a lot more with research and things like that. We're just trying to find maybe what we want to know. So, and I know in another NISTS conference, it basically said you have to know your transfer students first. So, but in general, the population at four-year schools and in community colleges is increasing. At least 10% of a college campus is somebody with a need.
Oh, no, absolutely. And
yeah.
I think community colleges get a substantially larger population because either those students are not admitted to the four-year school, or because of their, their particular needs, there's more flexibility at a community college. So yeah, so I've definitely heard that from my team. But yeah, I'm very curious as to what the page has. I don't know if you can show it.
Yes. Let me share again. I don't know if you can see it any better.
Oh yeah.
So this is the actual web page. This is the version on the accessibility site. So there is a little bit about actually transferring in to Bucks. And then some cool pictures. And then transferring out is the gist of it. So the student might need to do research either way, and that's what our offices help with. Agreements, what documentation they might need. A different need depending on, might be suggested, or a different accommodation might be different at each school a little bit. Unfortunately, there's no playbook in the sense of what accommodation. Is that answering the question?
Yes, thank you.
And then the way our web page is, there's different connections of what accessibility does on this particular page. On my page, it would have the transfer stuff. So it's encouraging that population to transfer. They can transfer. Their credits will transfer the same way. They shouldn't be discouraged.
Deb, I have a question. So do you do with the transfer accessibility program that you have started, do you see like there are like non-traditional students that are a little bit older that needed some like assistance into like college for the very first time or into a community college and then wanting to transfer to a four-year institution?
In that population, I haven't seen too many non-traditional. I'll be honest, but I may not see everybody. Sometimes, depending on that particular program, I want to say with what I know, the accommodations or that office may not be as accessible, depending on what the student needs, or it might be more online. So then that might need, you know, more of the screen readers and all that stuff. But I'm not sure if there's an increase in that population or there's that particular need with that population. Sometimes they stay closer in general, depending on what's going on, because they either stay at home because they need family or something like that, or it's their first time stepping away. So they want that comfort knowing somebody's there. So they kind of want closer schools. What other questions?
Deb, you mentioned that sometimes students don't want to disclose their disability, whether that's, you know, coming into the two-year institution or going out from the two-year institution. Do you think there's any reason? Do you think there's any stigma associated with that, or anything of a sort that maybe we could kind of try and eliminate from a four-year institution perspective?
Well, I think if the student's coming, especially maybe from high school, then it's more of they want to try it on their own. They've been followed so much. Maybe they've been in like a special classroom, depending on what's going on, or they had that help in a classroom kind of showing that they have something going on. So they don't want to be labeled anymore. But usually at a four-year school or even here, you almost can't tell, depending on what's going on. If there's a test going on, you know, and somebody's absent, probably the students are thinking about, well, oh, that person's here, they're taking extra time, or, you know, they might see a scribe or something like that, or note taker, whatever you want to say. But I try to encourage them that they're not labeled. It's additional help. It's something that they not necessarily that they need, but it's easily given to them most of the time. You know, I want to use the word, it could be technically mandated. Some students, I actually give them my own experience of what I went through, and that sometimes helps them. And even if they meet with an accessibility office, they don't necessarily have to take the accommodations. So sometimes it's just encouraging them to actually talk and see what's, you know, what they can do or how things happen. Sometimes the sticking point is getting the students early enough if there is a chance they need something for placement testing. Sometimes they don't get to us soon enough, or they can't retake it under accommodations if they've already taken it and they bombed it, but no, with extra time or something like that, they could do a little bit better. Is that answering your questions?
Yes,
Typically, probably from a community college to a 4-year or vice versa. Hopefully they have that advocacy, or a little more of the advocacy. So it might be just getting them to that office if it's somebody you're talking to that's leaving.
I think that's another point, and I'm glad that you're mentioning this. Every 2-year institution or 4-year institution has an disability accessibility office, however you want to phrase it. But it's just there. Like there's no, I mean, the student has to seek it. Nobody's flaunting it, right? Like we don't, and the institutions don't come out and say, oh, we have an, disability office and accessibility. There are resources that are available to you. And you are right. We see a lot more students with this need, and let's face it, we're going through a pandemic, so we're going to see not only students, we're going to see we're going to see staff and faculty, and needing resources, and to alleviate maybe anxiety that it was pandemic induced, and so on and so forth. But the point is that we don't necessarily advertise. We don't necessarily say, hey, look, you can come to Widener, or you can come to, we have, it's there, but nobody's advertising that. Nobody's, and I think part of it has to do with what you were touching on a little bit, that oftentimes students who are in need of accommodations are maybe reluctant to come up and say so. Or maybe, like you said, they are coming from a high school or elementary school when they've been so closely watched that they don't want that anymore. But the sad thing is that, they come into a 2-year or 4-year institution, and then they don't use the resources that are available to them. And then you see them failing. And oftentimes it's a little too late, by the time we figure out, because we would have to do some investigative work, right, in order to find out, why is the student failing? Why is this not working out? And the student's not successful. So very interesting points.
And I've noticed that when I've done like a Bucks open house or something like that, or like a service fair at Bucks, the tables that are least, the tables that people don't go to the most are the counseling and accessibility. Students aren't at student life, they're at a certain major or transfer, advising, or something like that, but they tend to shy away from that counseling and accessibility table. So I think it's like, well, if I'm seeing there, I need something. But basically it's, hey, this is what we offer, here's a flyer. So, but then there's some parents that are like, well, what do you offer? Because my daughter needs, or my son needs X, Y, and Z. Can you provide that? Probably, I think it was last week, I actually met with a student, and she had autism needs. And she's like, well, what school's best for me? Who has the best services? And I honestly couldn't answer that. I think I had knowledge of one school because on a visit day, they took us to the services, and they have a specific center that actually helps and study space, jobs, and all that stuff. And it's a separate from the accessibility office. But other schools, I couldn't really say too much. I'm like, you have to go to the website. So.
It's interesting that you've said that, Deb, because it makes me now want to reach out to that office and find out, not only what do they need, but what has been happening. Some of what I can imagine, and no data, just have to ask, is that the director of my Center on Disability would communicate with other centers, because I do know that they know each other. But I don't know that that helps a student with the admissions process or the transfer process. And so I'm even curious from the four-year school perspective, if those of you like Karina, do you get phone calls from your own accessibility disability office because the student has been in touch with them before they've talked to admissions, or just curious?
So generally speaking, it's the other way around from my perspective. So oftentimes during the admission process, the student mentioned that they are, they need some sort of accommodations. And I know Widener University usually assists students, tries to accommodate whatever need there is, right, for our students. So generally speaking, we would just refer them to the accessibility office and they kind of take it over. I also know that during the pandemic, so generally speaking, the feedback is really good. The students are pretty happy with, after they talk to the accessibility office and they get the feedback on what Widener is offering as far as resources for accommodation. So that's, I don't think I've ever, since I've been to Widener, I don't think I've ever had somebody coming back to me and asking for additional information after they discussed with the accessibility office. I also know that for students who are currently enrolled, and for the faculty and staff during the pandemic, the counseling and accessibility offered a lot of services and a lot of programs, workshops, online that are available to everybody. I know that they had extra activities for students as well, just to try and address some of the issues that kind of surfaced with the pandemic and everything having to be switched to the virtual environment. How do you deal with Zoom fatigue? How do you deal with feeling lonely, with feeling, depression is real and we all feeling it to some extent or another. And we're happy to see the world going back to reality, but it's good to know that there are resources, right, for everybody. So I know that they have been doing a lot to try and help with that. They've put together videos and different promoting materials to try and have students and faculty and staff come forward and make sure that they take advantage of the resources that are available, which is fantastic. So it's I think that usually the disability accessibility offices, I'm sure that all four-year institutions offer some sort of assistance, right, and resources to their students. They're always there. Every institution has it. It's just, like I said, it's just a matter of kind of sitting in the shadows. Like if the student needs it, then it's there. And maybe it's because the demand is not quite as big, and it depends on the size of the institution as well, right? If it's a really large public institution, chances are that there's going to be more students who are going to be needing such accommodations. If it's a small, depending on the institution size, right? If it's a small institution, there might not necessarily be so many students. But then again, maybe sometimes students who need accommodations would choose to go to a smaller private institution because they would, they would know that they would get better services.
Well, not better, but different. More personalized.
More personalized, exactly. And
don't want the larger schools to think,
Oh no, absolutely. And
I'm curious though, and not to interrupt, but I'm curious, and I would think the answer is no, but would there be any situation where a student was talking to admissions says, no, it doesn't look like you're going to be a good fit for us. we're about to deny you, but we didn't tell the student, and then you hear from, or the student reaches out to the accessibility office or whatever you call it, and then you hear back from them that actually if the student got XYZ, they should be fine? Like, would you make or change an admission decision because of something like that?
I think they're two separate things from my personal experience. I've never came across any situation like that, honestly, but I think they're two separate things because admission decisions are made based on academic history. It's got nothing to do with, with any type of disability, accessibility, however you want to call it. And oftentimes we don't even know that the student needs accommodations from the admissions perspective. Like the student doesn't necessarily come forward. Like I said, sometimes it takes until the student's actually enrolled and starts classes, and after they take classes, they realize they need additional support. Sometimes the parents speak on behalf of the student and request, that information up front. So I don't know, but maybe someone else wants to share.
And I would suspect, and I do this regardless of what a student might need. If they're a 2-5 student or a 2-3 student, we're looking at certain institutions. If there's a 3-9, we're looking at a different set of institutions potentially. And that's regardless of a need. Maybe the services might be different and we encourage certain schools, but the schools they're looking at hopefully are just in general based off of the GPA or their academic history.
Well, that was my assumption, but I wanted to at least ask.
Yeah, because I think there is something where admissions isn't based off of a need or something like that. But I could be wrong.
This is Cassandra. I work in admissions at Cedar Crest College, and I work predominantly with adult undergraduate students. So in our admissions capacity, we look at the student holistically. So if we see that they have not done all that well in their academics before straight out denying their admissions, we reach out to the student to see if they want to provide any other supplemental documentation explaining why they did not do well in their last academic setting. And through that, we have found that we have some students who had a disability. So then we connect them with our disability services office right away. They discuss a plan if they were to matriculate to the college. And then we work together to see if, admitting them into the program is going to be the most beneficial for them, or if having them take some courses at a community college where they can also get disability, assistance would be the best bet to then see if transferring back to Cedar Crest is going to be the most cost-effective and helpful pathway for them. So at least in my college, we work really closely with the students in disability services. In my experience, we've had many students disclose to us during the application process because they are adults, so they do want to be made aware of what services are allotted to them.
Yeah, I would, in most of our one-on-one meetings, I would say that the majority of our students tend to ask, and like while they're looking at the school or during the admissions process. But in all of our like one-on-one meetings and in our presentations and things like that, we always like to mention, the letters of recommendation and the essay are not required, but if there's something that you want to impart to us that would not be reflected in your portfolio of artwork or your transcripts, that's an opportunity to let us know. So yeah, or like sometimes additionally, like if we see a drop in grades or something, all of a sudden we'll kind of ask about that too. So yeah, so just to kind of get back to the root of the question, we would never, that's never come up, not to say that it couldn't, but I don't think that it would ever be a factor. I would hope not anyway. We try to be very helpful.
Mary Clark, I really like the webpage that you sent us. Thank you.
There are a couple of comments under the chat as well.
Okay.
I don't know if you got the chance to see them. Mary said Westchester University has a program specifically for this population called DUBC, DCAP. I feel that St. Joe does as well. Kim also added that we connect students with the appropriate person during the admission process. And Olivia said, I would agree. Most students I work with realize they need to be admitted prior to signing up the accommodation. So typically admissions is the first point of contact. And Mary did include a link for Westchester University in case, for the Vice Provost DCAP program, in case somebody wants to access that and get more information.
And I know Jen on the accessibility and she's connected with various schools in the area, and it's high schools and the colleges from like Del Val, like in the Lehigh Valley. There's some kind of consortium, I think. So kind of working together, we can get the students to their goals, making sure they get to the right place. Their credits transfer the same, so there should be no difference with that. It's just they feel maybe uncomfortable with how to get that documentation over. And I think I mentioned if they need to be reassessed, that can already be encouraged. Or talk about where to get a cheaper assessment or a sliding fee assessment depending on what's going on. What other questions or comments? Thank you.
Hi, this is Olivia from UNI. I didn't have a question, but I did have a comment, just since I know there's quite a few admissions folks on here. I just was going to drop in the chat the UNI accessibility website. So we have, during our admissions appointments, we have like a handout that specifically lines out the step-by-step for a student to get the accommodations. And so I think it's helpful for them. So I don't have the copy of the handout, but the website really lays it out, what we put on the handout. It's the same thing, it's just not in handout form. So I didn't know if that'd be helpful for any admissions people as well.
So Olivia, just to be clear, is that something that you give to all students so that they at least know that the service is available regardless of whether they qualify or not, or they need it or not?
Yeah, it's definitely something we bring up during all of our appointments. We talk about accommodation, especially with the transfer population. I mean, you don't know who needs accommodations, who doesn't need accommodations. And I don't know, I'm very like pro accommodation, that I also tried to emphasize to students like to set it up in advance just in case you need it, rather than trying to, middle of semester, which I know someone mentioned earlier as well too. So we definitely, I guess to save paper, we don't hand it out during every time, but we always bring it up and we have the handouts right on the desk when we meet with students. So we try to get the word out as much as we can, just as we know there are a lot of students with accommodations. And I don't know if that's the same at all institutions, but at UNI, I don't know the breakdown, of course, of our students, but it's definitely, I would say almost every other appointment that I meet with students, students will take the documentation paper. So it's very, very common.
So it sounds like what you guys are doing is to take away the stigma and just make it a, oh, by the way, it's just an everyday kind of thing, no big deal.
Yeah, and I would say most of the time as well too. Right away when I meet with students, I ask, what burning questions do you have? And I think transfer students, as being adults, and a lot of them already gone through the documentation process before, I'd say a majority of the time students even bring it up right away at the beginning of the appointment because they want to talk about it. So, and if they don't, then, talking about it to break down stigma is very important.
Yeah, our students actually created a accessibility advocacy group. So it's made up of those who are using the services and those who are advocates, because there is a push for awareness. There's famous people, from scientists to actors and actresses and politicians, who have needs, and kind of getting that out sometimes helps. Oh, did you know that Tom Cruise is dyslexic? What else? Albert Einstein was probably autistic. Stuff like that. I'm trying to remember. Rose Kennedy had mental health issues going on. So part of it's the stigma too. So just that awareness, and there's certain needs that might come up at a drop of the hat, like traumatic brain injury, something physical. Mental health could have a break for some reason once the student hits college. So the more visible the office is, I think the better. Maybe not pushing against services, but hey, we're here. Maybe even partnering with tutoring. That's another office. So. What other questions? Happy to answer.
Just one thing I wanted to add based on what Olivia said, that I know that a lot of institutions add this type of information in an admissions presentation. So I know at Widener, we do that. So we do list it under student resources, right, for student success, so that, we list the name of the disability, and we do mention it in our presentation, right, so that students who are visiting campus, who are watching the presentation online, or whatever the case is, that to get their eyes on that presentation or hear about it, they will know about it. So that's kind of our way of it's like Olivia said, just to kind of normalize it, like it's just something, everyday occurrence, right? It's something that anybody should know about, and something that everybody should be aware of.
What other discussion points? So this is good.
Are there any other questions for Deb? All right, Deb.
Let me say thank you. I appreciate you guys coming. Let me know if you have any questions. It's making it aware, making awareness on campus, collaborating with offices, reaching out to colleges, helping students get to where they want to go. So enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us.
No problem. Thank you so much.